Hey everyone, this is Soup here, and today I'm joined with my friends for the first episode of the Resistance Radio podcast. With me here I have three of my friends, and the first of which is Rico Chico Maliko, someone you might be already familiar with.
Hi guys, yep, I'm Rico, like Soup said, probably familiar with me already, especially if you know who Soup is. Like everyone else here, I'm a big Star Wars fan. The main focus of my channel is Star Wars Versus series, but beyond that I also do a series on the lore of Force powers, and I've started branching out into crossovers as well. Really looking forward to this first episode, so hopefully we can have a ton of fun.
Another YouTuber you may recognize if you watch my videos is AI Central.
Hey guys, what's up? AI here, and if you guys know who I am, you probably know who Soup and Rico are as well. Yeah, I do Star Wars videos, mostly Versus, trying to branch out more. I'm also thinking of taking on other franchises like Halo and Warhammer. I'm also on Comic Vine as well, as AI Artificial Intelligence. And yeah, I hope this attempt at a podcast goes a lot better than our previous few.
And someone you may not already know, but someone who is easily as knowledgeable as any of us, is Emperor DMB from Comic Vine.
Hey guys, I'm Emperor DMB. I'm not a prolific Star Wars YouTuber, but I am a prolific member of Comic Vine, where I posted various blogs, and I consider myself to be an expert primarily on things Darth Bane related and related to the ones of Mortis.
Today we'll be talking about two different topics. The first topic is characters we would like to have further expanded upon, either through comics, novels, movies, video games, etc. And this can be expanded universe characters, it can be canon characters. And the second is new characters or obscure characters or events we would like to see further expanded upon that really haven't been expanded on at all, or very little as of yet. So starting off on the first topic, a character I'd really like to see further expanded upon is Quinlan Vos in a new canon. And the book having been out for a year, I think it's kind of a free game to have some spoilers discussed. Dark Disciple, I wasn't really happy with it at all. It seemed like they were banking on attracting Quinlan Vos fans from the expanded universe, but they ended up making a kind of bland version of him. So since they went out of their way to bring him into the new canon, but have him be so, in my opinion, mediocre, I think they should go in a kind of radical direction and have him be totally different than he was before. Well, not totally different, but have him his story be drastically different, rather. I'd really like to see him further expanded upon, either by entering the continuity of Rebels, maybe not through the show, because he might be a little bit too dark of a character.
Yeah.
But it would be cool to see him in a new comic or another novel, exploring him further. Because I don't know about you guys, but I thought his debut in TCW was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was very off.
Do you think Dave Filoni should give the author of said novel, plot direction?
To us.
What'd you say?
You say should Dave Filoni give the author of the novel a hand in terms of character development, but to be honest, Dave Filoni is probably just as much to blame for Vos's character.
Yeah. I'm not one of those guys who bashes on Filoni or Lucas just to bash on them, but there are a few things that you really kind of have to call Dave out on, in my opinion.
I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah,
though I did enjoy a lot of the Clone Wars, so credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
He completely ruined Grievous, in my opinion. I'm pretty harsh on Filoni when it comes to Grievous, especially.
I do feel like they were redeeming their portrayal of Grievous in seasons 6 and 7 and stuff. If Son of Dathomir and the unfinished Utapau arc is any indication.
Yeah, I actually agree with you.
Yeah, the unfinished episodes, I saw them. I watched a couple of them on the Star Wars site, and they actually looked like they had some potential. Even some of the clips that were done, I've seen on YouTube, they looked pretty interesting. To be honest, but obviously probably never gonna get those. But they did look interesting. I will admit.
He kind of came back to his former self for a bit when he attacked Dathomir. But aside from that, on Dark Disciple, again, he was just made out to be completely inept and incapable of doing anything.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
another character I'd actually like to see.
Pretty inconsistent.
Yeah. So what about you, Rico? It's one of the characters you picked.
A character I'd like to see more expanded upon, although there's a slim chance because Legends, of course, is no longer canon, is Darth Nihil from the Legacy era. I think I'm part of the general popular opinion that Nihil was probably one of the more favoured members of the Sith Order, because I think what attracts me and a lot of other people to him is that besides Darth Krayt, Nihil is the only member that was not born into the Order. He was born into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like Krayt, Nihil used to be a warlord. He used to be a ruler. He had a leader. He had people to serve him. He knows what it's like to be in a position of power. So you get this sort of an ambitious streak, if you will, when you look at his character. I would have liked to have seen more of not only his past, but I've liked to have seen what he did with the One Sith Order, because for those who haven't read Legacy, at the end of Volume 1, Nihil takes up control of the Order, and he takes them back into hiding. But when we do get to read Legacy Volume 2, we don't really know what he's doing with the Order, because it cuts away to a different story almost entirely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I mean, I think it would also have been cool to see, like, Nihil in this, scheming role, because he's usually a warrior, isn't he? He's more of the guy who likes to, be the head of the battle rather than sit back and plan and scheme and stuff like that. So, I mean, it would have been cool to see him in some kind of role where he's like some politician or some mayor or something, someone of high status, and maybe some world in the outer rim or something like that. People unaware of his like previous life and stuff like that, what he's done, and the fact that he was sort of in control of the Sith after Krayt, and Warlock had been like taken out essentially. He was meant to be like the sort of like their ruler now. But yeah, I think it would have been cool to see what would happen to him, like what new roles he would have been taking. He'd have to take as the new ruler of the Sith. Like what would have happened to like the Triumvirate now, the Galactic Alliance, Jedi Order, the Empire, all that stuff. I think it would be interesting to see what his plans and machinations would have been. But obviously, we got a completely separate story from what we had, with a few cameos of characters from the original Legacy volume, but there was no continuation of the stories. Yeah, there was no continuation of the story, especially when there was potential and like what's it called, like cliffhangers from the last season, at least from the last comic series, where you have all these Sith dressed up as all these politicians and people of influence essentially, and then we just have Volume 2. Anya Solo, a distant descendant of the Solo tree, who's not been Force sensitive. They tried to do this scoundrel's story arc, but obviously just didn't. I don't think most people bought into that. Did you guys particularly?
Yeah, definitely not.
How did that even happen?
I don't know.
Hold on a second. Jaina Solo was like the last one of the Solos since Anakin and Jaina died.
She might have had children.
She took on Fel's name. So
yeah,
their descendants would have had the Fel name. How did like another Solo pop up?
That's actually a good question, to be honest. I never really thought of that.
Exactly.
Anya Solo.
Something else about
Anya Solo, Cardis's daughter. So her children might have her sons or daughters may have kept her last name. So there's always that. I guess that's where it is. Yeah, I completely skipped my mind because I'm not a huge NJO fan, so it didn't really strike me. Yeah.
Something else about Nihil is that, from a grander timeline perspective, he is the last known Dark Lord of the Sith in the Legends continuity. So that just adds a whole new gravity to just his.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Actually, yeah. Damn, wow, this is really insightful. I never actually thought too deep into this. Fair enough. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I would agree with Rico that his ambition is what makes him really interesting. The problem I have with most of the One Sith is that they really kind of lack ambition, since their purpose in life is to serve Krayt. Especially Darth Talon, who worships Krayt like some sort of dark sex god or something. She doesn't have that greater ambition, and that's basically why she's my least favorite Sith. Like, from a Sith philosophical standpoint, her possessing that selfless devotion to Crate is just kind of disgusting from a Sith point of view.
Yeah.
And Kyle actually having that ambition makes him more interesting and likable as a Sith for me.
Yeah. We talked about this before. That's what made Warlock so great, too, because he wasn't in love with Crate himself. He was in love with his idea, so much so that he was even willing to usurp Crate, even though he was essentially the birth of that idea, if it meant keeping that idea further. So even though he was loyal, he was only loyal up until a point, and he was loyal in a way that was interesting, whereas Talon was like really kind of flat in that regard.
He's loyal to the idea.
In that regard.
I mean, you can appreciate that she was raised, most likely raised to think that way, but it doesn't give us a good perspective. Although I would have been curious to see how she would have reacted to Niall being in charge of the Once Authority, because they were their biggest rivals, respectively.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if she would continue to serve Niall, or would she have buggered off?
I do feel like they got along with each other better than either of them got along with fucking Strafe.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
seriously.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, it sort of makes you think, you know, what's her face? It's sort of the relationship with, Sidious and Maul before, you know, Sidious screwed Maul over. You know, Maul, Sidious was Maul's whole world. It is the same thing with Talon as well. You know, like, once Crate died, I can only imagine what she's going through. I can't imagine what she's going through, but, like, you know what I mean. She's, she doesn't know what to do. Her whole world is gone, essentially. She has no identity. She has no independence. Like, will she join the Sith? Will she stop being a Sith? Will she do what Maul did and try to raise a criminal empire? You know, it's just those things that we could have seen in, Legacy, Volume 2. But then again, it's one of those things. Cause essentially, when you take away Crate, you take away Talon as a character. You take away her reason, her motivations for being who she is, essentially. There's nothing more to her than just Crate. You know, that's...
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Shit, that kind of makes me wonder, is... I've never actually read Legacy, but how did Talon handle it, like, for that long period of time where everyone thought Crate was dead?
When Crate dies and Niall takes control, the last scene you see of Talon is she's walking away from the tombs of Korriban, I think it is, in a hooded robe, and that's it, it's vague.
No, I meant with Warlock's betrayal, like, for that period of time where everyone thought, oh wait, no, they didn't. My bad.
She knew Crate survived.
Yeah, she knew Crate survived.
Everyone thought he was in stasis. Warlock lied to everyone. What am I saying?
Yeah, she was the one to find Crate after he survived.
Yeah.
She was, like, guarding him obsessively during that time.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
imagine.
literally watching him sleep.
That must have been heaven for her, honestly.
My Dark Lord of the Sith. Yeah.
So what about you, AI? What's one of the characters you picked?
One of the characters I picked was actually, get ready fanboys, Revan, essentially. Basically his origins, because essentially what Revan is a generic blank character. He's one of those RPG characters that do whatever you want, but he wasn't really flushed out in terms of his origin. Like, obviously we got the Revan, novel, and got the subsequent add-ons for the, Star Wars New Republic MMO, but we never actually got anything, like, about him, or his, like, actual life prior to the events of Not So New Republic. So, I'd like to know stuff about, like, his life before, like, how did he join the Order, how did he meet Malik, or Alec at the time, what's his real name, because, for those of you who don't know, Revan isn't actually his real name, and neither is Malik's, essentially, because, Malik's real name is actually Alec. They changed their names to evade, like, the Jedi Order's, nose or something like that, so their radar, essentially. They basically wanted to do whatever they could to join the war, so they had to change their names and things like that. I'd like to know his relationship with Mitris Surik, with Treya, with, like, even the Republic soldiers he served next to. What decisions, like, drove him to the dark side? Because he was already on that path even before, he and Malik were corrupted by the Sith Emperor. I'd like to know what decisions he had to make. Did he have to kill some innocent people? Did he kill unarmed warriors? Did he torture anyone? You know, is that sort of thing? Did he let people die on purpose to achieve his goals? You know, is that sort of thing where the prodigal knight, you know, who's doing this thing is so right, who's still trying to do right, but ends up becoming much worse than what he intended, than what he originally intended to destroy. It's the same thing with like Anakin as well. He had good intentions, but then that drove him to the dark side. So I like to see sort of an origin story for, you know, the prodigal knight, the Force, the great being who's meant to, you know, save the galaxy and stuff like that. But obviously, much better handling than the prequels. But yeah. That's pretty much. I'd also probably maybe to like to see what his life was like as a Sith, because we didn't get much in that either. We knew he almost took the whole galaxy. He almost destroyed the Republic. Sorry, as a Sith. I know. I'd like to know like what exactly happened. Who did he ally with? You know, it's not like he just came back and brought a whole freaking army with him. Well, maybe he did, but you know, I'd like to know. Essentially, I'm really anxious because Revan is one of my favorite characters, even though many people, you know, see him as a blank slate, which I think I can agree with. But you know, he still like appeals to me, especially the Knights of the Republic. Was one of my favorite games of all time, essentially. But yeah, I'd like to see more on Revan's origins mostly.
Give us feats.
Give us
Revan, what you said, like, Revan is kind of a blank slate, so for a lot of that, for the most part, like, Revan's character is really more of an idea, I guess.
Yeah.
What I actually liked is when he actually got characterization in the, like, not really so much in the Revan novel, but during the Foundry Flashpoint in Star Wars The Old Republic, you can sort of see the point he's at, and you can sort of see that he's a tragic character, I guess. You can almost feel the sorrow and the drive to actually, like...
desperation. Yeah.
Now, granted, Shadows of Revan did basically turn him into Gollum, which I didn't really like. He has, like, the worst case of multiple personality disorder known to man.
Yeah.
We cast you out! Like, what?
He's one of the better characters to do that with, too, because, we've proven, or not we, but, like, the expanded universe has proven you can take characters that are, like, blank slates like that from a video game and turn them into, like, a really interesting character.
Oh, yeah.
They did it with Jaden Core. Jaden Core was extremely bland in the Jedi Academy video game. But then he got Cross Current and Riptide, and he featured a little bit in NGO as well, or NJO. But he's really well fleshed out, and because Revan was like, he's been through so many different phases of his life. Like there has to be some place within like his life that we can like further see.
Yeah, he had his mind wiped and everything, and like he lost his family, and like his greatest enemy has kept him for 3 centuries in stasis, you know, plunging through his mind. So obviously you can expect the guy to be, you know, off his rocker a bit.
Yeah, that's what I think one of the best things about a blank slate is, because it gives you so much potential as to what you can do with a character. I mean, like, going back to Talon, she was a blank slate, which that was why I wanted to see that era of Legacy expanded upon, because that could have actually given us something to make her likable.
Yeah, I agree. So what about one of the people you picked, D&B?
Well, if I'm permitted to cheat...
No, go ahead.
I was mainly thinking about the intermediary Banite Sith Masters, the Sith in the Banite line between Darth Bane and Darth Plagueis.
Oh, yeah.
I would have liked to have seen them more explored. Like, with Zana, I would have liked to have seen how she handled the role of the Master after seeing 2 books where she's the apprentice. I would have liked to have seen her in a galaxy without Bane actually having to take the reins of the Order itself, and really just kind of wonder what kind of post-death thoughts she would have about him. Like, obviously she wouldn't think of him as somebody beyond her, but she would, like, admire his legacy still and try and do her best to respect that. And then Cognis as well. For those of you who aren't aware, Cognis was Zana's apprentice, and she had this ability to summon visions of the future. And with enough training, I would have loved to have seen how she could manipulate the galaxy on a grand scale with so much knowledge of what events would affect what specific outcomes, and just how that would lead to the rise of the Grand Plan. And then, of course, there's Darth Vectivus, who is touched upon in the Legacy of the Force series, a Sith who wasn't really all that bent on galactic domination, and just kind of really enjoyed, I guess, Sith lore and knowledge while living a basically normal life aside from that. That would have been interesting to see. And then, of course, you have the Gravid Gene storyline mentioned in Plagueis, where one of the Sith got obsessed with the light side and is driven mad trying to straddle the light and the dark, and how Gene had to kill him. I would have loved to have seen that fleshed out, because that's actually a really interesting concept. But most of all, I would have really loved to see what Darth Ramage was like. He was a Sith Lord mentioned in the Jax Paven novels, and it's not really known even what species he is, but just from the powers that he was experimenting with, he was like experimenting with some pretty advanced Sith illusions. But most interestingly of all, he experimented with time manipulation.
Oh yeah.
He was evidently a pretty fucked up individual, since a lot of those experiments involved, I guess, torturing and dissecting these weird alien creatures that could see the future. No, but I mean, like, true, but that did just strike me as pretty screwed up, because it was almost genocidal, I guess.
Yeah, I think, didn't Cognos have, this apprentice, or she had two, she tried to get rid of the last one, Darth Millennial? He, started a cult or something. He had, a third eye, and didn't he have, similar powers to Cognos? So, that's,
yeah, they had, a falling out, because he thought Lord Khan's philosophy was superior to Bane's.
Oh, right. Oh, clearly not, because, Khan is part of the dead. But yeah.
And just, I guess, thematically, the machinations of the Banite line are responsible for pretty much all of the war manipulation events that go on in the movies. So, it really would have been nice to have seen a lot more of the process that went behind that.
Yeah, that's true. Because, the Sith have been accumulating knowledge and influence over the years, generations. As they grow their power, they're also growing their influence over the galaxy and the Republic, making it ever more corrupt, bringing degrading the Jedi as well. It's all this matter of time and scheming. I'd like to see what else would have gone in, because I know Darth Bane had this nest of informants around the galaxy, essentially, which would tell him what was, inform him what was going on, and anything important, anything critical. He and Zana would also involve themselves with any upstart rebel groups, essentially, like insurgents, essentially. For instance, there's these rebel groups on Sereno. So for those of you who don't know, that's Count Dooku's home world. Basically, so Sereno is on the outer rim, and there's this group of nobles that are trying to, make themselves separate from the Republic. But essentially what Darth Bane and Zana do is they manipulate them into making them fail on purpose and making them step on their own toes, essentially, so they don't get any traction. Which further helps their cause, because it draws attention away from the Sith and more towards other distractions, stuff like that. You also get the same thing with the Stark Hyperspace War and the Yingchori Crisis. That's all part of the Sith. They're manipulating everything, and that's slowly degrading the Republic and the Jedi, building themselves up, essentially.
I can interject something about the rebel insurgency on Sereno. At the beginning of the Banite line, in the incipient stages of the Grand Plan, Bane and Zana sabotaged the insurgents so that the Republic wouldn't be weakened, so that it wouldn't fracture, because Bane figured that the Republic being one entity would be a lot easier to manipulate than if it fragmented and the galaxy became a lot more chaotic. But also the fact that if there's not as much of a threat to the Republic, the Jedi would grow, I guess, more complacent in their peace and become less prepared to deal with conflict, which I personally think is what all the insurgencies that the Sith caused at the end of the Grand Plan were about. Like, after the Republic had been stagnating and weakening for 1,000 years, the Sith would, like, manipulate the rebels to really confront them with issues they hadn't been forced to deal with in a millennia that they weren't really prepared to handle.
Okay, because I was under the impression that the reason Bane didn't let any of these, insurgencies grow too large was because it would make it more difficult for them to manipulate these rebels, essentially, because not only do you have the Republic to scheme against, you also have all these different rebel factions popping up. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think...
Oh yeah, that was definitely a part of it, because
yeah.
he actually did say that to Zana, that a single entity is easier to control.
Yeah, and all these different factions popping up. You know, it's really interesting, if you think about it. Yeah, it'd be great to see what Sith, like, influence, how the Sith influence Galaxy as a whole. Like, we don't even know. There might, one of those, Baynard Sith may have also been, a Supreme Chancellor at one point. You never know, it's one of those things. They could have been...
Oh, well, no, one of them was.
Oh, yeah, obviously, we all know that. Yeah. I mean, it'd also be interesting to think that, like, maybe even one of them had, like, infiltrated the Jedi. They were posing as a Jedi, perhaps, because I know in the Old Republic timeline there was this whole these Jedi. Essentially, they weren't Jedi; they were a family of pretenders. They were all Sith who actually answered to the Sith Emperor, the resurgent Sith Empire, essentially, and they would act as informants. But they had been his family of Jedi, because, you know, families were allowed back then. So it'd been cool to see that. Oh, maybe this apprentice had been pulling as a Jedi his whole life. But, you know, they were so oblivious to it because they were so arrogant and conceited, you know, things like that. That would have been interesting to, you know, get some insight on.
If I can delve off into a side tangent on Banite philosophy, for me, a lot of the ingenuity with Bane's Order came from the fact that the main weakness of the Sith was the infighting, and Bane's philosophy turned that into a strength because it became a mechanism for this cyclical improvement and evolution. Whereas with the Jedi, what Bane's philosophy did was remove the Sith from the public eye, so that the Jedi could have nothing to band together against, essentially removing their greatest strength while leaving them in peace so that they could weaken. Really, a lot of my respect for Bane's philosophy was that he used it to transform the Sith's greatest weakness into a strength, and used it to turn, essentially, Jedi philosophy against the Jedi.
Alright.
Yeah, I agree.
That's interesting, yeah.
Alright, so the second topic we have here is new characters, or obscure events, or new events we'd like to see further expanded upon. And one of the few I'd really like to see is the conflicts between the Death Watch and the traditional Mandalorians, as well as the state of the planet of Mandalore before the rather reformist government it came to take. Because in TCW we see, remember when Obi-Wan Kenobi first lands on Mandalore, and Duchess Satine's talking about how, like, they're all civilized now, and like that's like a huge reform after thousands and thousands and thousands of years of the Mandalorians.
Oh yeah.
So there had to have been something catastrophic that happened, and this is in canon continuity too.
I think there was this thing I read about a while ago where essentially, I think the Mandalorians had, like, the home world they call Mandalore, they caused so much war on the planet that it destroyed them. That's why you see them. That's why you see them live in all these, like, these glass cities, essentially, because they've destroyed the planet. And I think a group of Mandalorians came out and said, "Hey, you know, we messed up our planet. We've been defeated by the Republic numerous times. It's just time to stop." I think that's how they came down to it. They just wanted to, like, just end those whole conflict thing. You know, they saw it as like a step off from themselves. They're becoming better. But obviously, you have these people who are like, "Oh no, you know, we'll stay with the old Mandalorian traditions," and that's how the Death Watch sort of surged off in the true Mandalorians, because the new Mandalorians actually didn't recognize the true Mandalorians, and the Death Watchers, Mandalorians, and became terrorist groups. But I think that's how like they all diverted into different various groups. Well, I could be wrong. So
no, you are right. I remember them mentioning it. I understand that like they gave a reason, but it just didn't seem solid enough. Like from a storytelling perspective, I'd rather have seen like the actual like political happenings of all that like actually go on, rather than it just be basically handed to us.
Something else that I realized could tie into that was I was thinking how in this reformist movement did Satine, a pacifist, not get killed by all the angry Mandalorians, but then I remembered that it was mentioned that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were at one point protecting her, so if they did expand upon that, they could also bring Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon into the mix and expand more upon their master-apprentice relationship.
Which we need desperately in the new canon.
And give Obi-Wan and Satine some more backstory.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like a mission that they were on for over a year? What events happened over that? You know?
Yeah, that is a long time to be on a mission. That's I was gonna say, going back to the thing about how you're saying that how Satine wasn't killed outright for saying something so stupid against, blaster toting, Mandarins is, Satine wasn't among the first monarchs of the new Mandalorians who come. Like, this system of pacifism has been around for like generations, for centuries even. It's gone back a long ass time. So I think I know what you mean. I mean, they could have done with all that time. They could have slotted in some explanation for it. Because even in the Mandalorian temple, we see like this Mandalorian mural of how the Mandalorians were fighting the Jedi. And it's I don't know, maybe Satine could have walked Obi-Wan through the palace, that's a very nice mural you got there. What's it about? And then she goes into this like mini monologue about how the Mandalorians used to be this warrior culture. So obviously we told a lot that they used to be warriors, but we never really given any visual context, like how ruthless they were. Like the fact that they were on par with the Jedi or something like that. Because we also get that like, previous is like, the Jedi are our worst enemy or something like that. They did everything wrong with Mandalorian society is it's their fault essentially. But yeah, I think it would have been good to get a lot more insight on that and the whole reasoning behind the pacification of a Mandalorian culture. Well, most of it anyways, as you know.
So, moving on, what about you, Rico? What would you like?
I would have liked to have personally seen maybe an adaptation of the Tales of the Jedi comic series, because it was one of the more interesting eras, because when you look at the war that Exar Kun rages, you see that there are a lot of Jedi that become degraded in their morale, in a sense. Well, as it does with the Jedi in any of the wars, the Clone Wars is another prime example of this, because so many of them decided to leave the Order and join Kun and his forces. So I wanted to see what sort of things would motivate them to do that. And of course, the ancient Sith are some of the most interesting members of the Order that I think to have ever existed in the Sith Order. So it would have been nice to see some of the more, I don't know, is primitive a word to use to describe them? Not primitive, but it's not the usual sort of Sith that we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, low grade, I guess you could say.
Low grade.
Or downgraded, yeah.
It's interesting to see things like that happen on TV, because we rarely ever saw any rituals. So to see that happen on a more frequent basis would be an interesting thing to see as well. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It would also be great to see like the whole like Ulic becoming a Sith, because obviously we got, I think was it Tales of Jedi Volume 3 where Exar Kun and Ulic join forces, and then we skip to the next volume where it's like at the tail end of the war, essentially. Like not much, we don't actually see, because at the time Ulic like killed his brother, we didn't actually know whether he had turned to the dark side or he did. Well, obviously we knew he did, but we didn't know like how much of a person he actually changed. Because it'd be great to see, like, because I mean, I think you're aware of how they both became the Dark Lords of the Sith. Like literally, they battled, and then what's his face? Marco Ragnos comes in.
Ragnos.
Yeah, he comes in, it's like, you guys, you're Sith now, and then they like clasp hands and they're bros for life. Like, I was like, what the hell? That's so random. Oh yeah, it's been Sith. And then Ulick, the guy who was trying to get rid of it, is like, okay, cool. Like, is this, you know, it didn't
Yeah, that was always kind of weird to me.
yeah, it didn't seem to be a bit off to you. It's like, oh, what? It's like, I'm not gonna become a Sith. Leave me alone, Kay.
Yeah.
Leave me alone, Nomi. Guess what? Comes a freaking Dark Lord of the Sith. Oh well. Yeah, go on. What are you gonna say, Dylan?
Yeah, especially since Kuhn, like, evidently interrupted Ulick getting laid. Like, Ulick and Alima are, like, sitting on a bed. Ulick doesn't have a shirt on for some reason. Like, that was going somewhere, and Kuhn just kind of interrupted that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it always stood out to me. I mean, I want to see. It would also be great to see like their relationship. You know, did Ulick try and like challenge what's his face, Exar Kun a couple times? You know, as every Sith apprentice does. Mag did it. He got his Georgia taken off. Yeah, you know, did he try to scheme with anyone else? But by the looks of the Dark Souls of the Sith, like he seemed pretty loyal up until, you know, he sold Kun out against all the Jedi. But you know what I mean. He didn't try and vie for power. I think that was always more of Alima's sort of thing, even though she tried to like stab him in the back. But obviously, yeah, it'd been interesting to see like from that period to that period what happened. I agree with you. Tales of the Jedi would have been interesting to see more of what actually, you know, what happened during the Great Sith War. You know, one of the most influential wars in the galaxy. Especially when you read the campaign guide, there's actually a lot about like characters from that era as well, especially like the Krath, as well as some Exar Kun's other apprentices as well. It would be great to know like more about them. You know, just more story essentially about that period in general. But yeah,
I think it was Vodo Sios Bosk that was being accredited to being essentially the Yoda of that era.
I think it was
Ud Bernard.
Oh yeah, it was Ud Bernard. You're right.
Wait, I thought it was
Boss was the Swindle
Boss was
of
in
the
the
era, I
Swindle
think.
of the era. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Well, either way, both of those characters, I would really like to see them like actually have some feats in showings.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Even a little bit before that time.
Exactly.
See a non-lightsaber wielder wield a staff. I mean, we saw Rey do that, but we didn't ever actually saw someone fight a Force wielder with a staff yet. Come on.
Yeah.
I want that.
Vodo's a weapons master, which is like
Yeah, he's
one
a
of
weapons
the
master.
honorary rules in the Jedi Order.
Yeah, exactly.
Which,
He
in
was
my
one of the
opinion,
biggest,
is more impressive than even being a battle master, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he was the Mace Windu of the time, so that should pretty, you know, put into perspective. I expanded material. I'd like more expansion on. Are any of you aware with the Dawn of the Jedi comic series?
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is the origin of like the Jedi Order and like the Sith as well. I would have liked to see more about what happened like afterwards. After, you know, what was his name? Like that Dathomir witch girl and oh yeah, Sesh and I can't remember her name. She was this ginger Dathomir witch. I'd like to see what happened. Was it?
Are you talking about the origins of the Dathomirian witches?
No, not the origin of the witches. The girl featured in the series happened to be the daughter of a pair of Dathomirians who died during
I'm afraid
Civil War.
I could swear that that the Dathomirian witches weren't a thing until some time between the Rusan campaign in 1000 BBY and the movie era, because the Night Sister culture didn't start until like 600 for the movies.
Yeah, no, this is before all the Night Sister culture and everything. This is when like there were still males on Dathomir. Like this was like regular. There wasn't any subjugation of Zabraks and stuff like that. This was like
It's like the precursor to all that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you think about it. This is a series that had the Sith training as Jedi, and you know, with canon conflicts, the Jedi didn't find the Sith until like later on after the 100-Year Darkness. So you know, I don't know. It's it conflicts with what we were already establishing in Legends, but I still like the series a lot. But yeah, so basically what happens is Zesh is sent by the Rakata, his master essentially, to find a new world, you know, infiltrate it, blend in or whatever, and then like report, and then his masters come in, the Rakats come in, and they try to take the Tython system, but obviously they're defeated, and then, you know, we see Zesh and the Dathomiri go off, and he's like, oh, are you ready for the adventure? And he's like, yeah, and then I think they're a couple as well this time, and I would have liked to see what happened afterwards. Even though that's a pretty good way to end the story. This is the third arc in that whole Dawn of the Jedi comic series, but I would like to see what happened because you also get some other stuff that goes up, like what happened to the Sith. Essentially, there's these weapons called Force Sabers, which can only be activated by, you know, the power of the dark side, and you know, this guy, I keep forgetting the names. This guy who had foreseen the coming of the Rakata after delving into this massive hole. Yeah, this is a while ago since I read this, so apologies if I can't properly state what I'm talking about. He gets this vision of the Rakata, and then after the order's been exposed to the Force Sabers, because that's the only way they can fight. Essentially, the Force Sabers are powered through the dark side, and this guy who, after they've defeated the Rakata threat, and he's like, oh, there's still more to be done, and it's like, you need to stop restraining, you know, all this, you know, balance and the Force stuff, but then this guy's like, he's not having it, and then I think that sort of breaks off into, you know, how the Dark Jedi became, essentially, because that would be a great leap-off point for the writers to then go and say, oh, yeah, here's the new, here's another canon interpretation of how the Dark Jedi became, because obviously they've already got the Sith there. So, you know, it's only they could just simply, like, have most of the pure-blood Sith who are there, and then just bring them over, have them join this guy, who's clearly, has no qualms about using the dark side. I mean, he's already dark side-ish abilities at this point, so, you know, he's probably further down the line. I'd love to see what happened. So maybe, you know, Sesh and this other girl I was talking about, they could, in some next arc, they could see those two come into conflict, you know, him trying to stop this uprising of the Dark Jedi, you know, working, and maybe they join him or something like that. But, you know, it would be interesting to see, personally. Obviously, it's not the most well-known story or time period, but I just prefer the older Star Wars stories than to the more recent ones. Yeah, that's I'd love to see that, essentially.
What about you, DMB?
An era I would have liked to have seen expanded on, or like a period of time, is I guess that period of time between NJO era and the Legacy series, because there was just a lot for me that I didn't really get closure on and wasn't really dealt with, I guess because the Legends continuity was for the most part discontinued. And there's a lot I would have liked to have seen there, like the development of Alana Solo as a character, since she's been hyped up quite a bit. She's the daughter of Jason Solo, Darth Kaitis, and she was also prophesied to be this great being sitting on the throne of balance, in some sort of position of great power in the galaxy.
Really?
Yeah, and she was also the first person we see Abeloth make telepathic contact with in the Fate of the Jedi series.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting.
And so she's just kind of being built up, and for a decent portion of the last Fate of the Jedi novel, Apocalypse, the Lost Tribe of the Sith is actually trying to hunt Alana down because they know about that prophecy, and they don't want a Jedi on the throne of balance, like, in control of the galaxy, so they're trying to kill her.
Oh, right.
And also, I would love to see where her powers develop, because even as a 9-year-old, she's doing some crazy shit like shooting Sith down with a blaster, which is pretty insane, come to think of it. And also, I would have liked to have seen some closure on Luke's part, because specifically, Luke's journey beyond Shadows in Fate of the Jedi was very interesting. He goes into this, I guess, spiritual realm and he encounters the pool of knowledge and font of power. The pool of knowledge, which is said to give you knowledge of everything if you bathe in it, and the font of power, which is said to give you the power to do pretty much anything. And Luke is tempted by the font. He's tempted to drink from it to gain the power to save the Jedi Order from being destroyed again, and he decides against drinking it from it because he reasons that he's created the Jedi Order and that he needs to trust those who have followed him to carry on even after he's gone, so that the Jedi Order can stand on some strength other than his own. When he looks into the waters of the pool of knowledge, he sees himself, but he sees a broken down version of himself. The strain he's put himself through trying to save the galaxy and build this new Jedi Order, that he's essentially worn down his very spirit and being doing this. And just with all that set up, I would have liked to have seen, I guess, the passing of the torch, the moment when Luke either dies or passes on, and he does so with that trust that the order he created can stand on its own.
Right.
And really just the resolved fates of the trio from the original trilogy in general would have been nice to have seen.
And you think that, he wouldn't pass it on to, I don't know, Ben, his son? You think it would have been Elena more of? Because of the prophecy?
I'm not sure what it would have been, but I would have liked to have, whatever it was, not necessarily him anointing a new leader, but just kind of him passing on and, I guess, dying content with that sort of trust in the other Jedi.
Oh, okay. Because I don't know that much on the NGO period, so I'm just saying what I know. So if I'm just scraping the bottom of the barrel, I don't know essentially what happened. But that does sound interesting, essentially.
Quick question: I don't remember. Did Fate of the Jedi end concisely, or did it end on a cliffhanger? I forget.
Well, it ended for the most part pretty concisely, with I guess Abeloth's defeat, but there was the fact that one of her tentacles, since she's a creepy hentai monster thing, one of her materials, or not